Thanks everybody for joining. Really excited to about this next 30 minutes exciting panel that we have to talk about intelligent supply chain. So let me share my screen here for a minute. Yeah, so just starting with a quick introduction of the panelists. I'm excited to be joined by Michael Spath, who is in Germany, Hamburg, part of the 361 family. We have Chris from Sky Republic, CEO and founder, and then we also have Nidhi, CEO and founder of Podcast. So I'll hand it over to Michael to introduce himself, give his background, and then followed by Chris, Nidhi, and then I'll go last.
And I think Michael might have a conflict from what I can see. So I think if you want to do the intros or you want to do your own that opening presentation, Didi, why don't you go for it?
Yeah, so myself, I essentially see myself as a leader who goes through innovation throughout my journey. I like to say that I lead with innovation in mind. And so I come from a multicultural background, born in Senegal, multicultural because both my parents work for the UN. So growing up, I was exposed to a lot of different cultures, nationality, ethnicities. See myself as also, I'm an inventor, 3 patents issued, 1 pending in 4 different areas: logistics, logistics, public safety, location-based advertising, and insurance. Also being an angel investor in the ecosystems across 17 startups. Spent 20 plus years at Ernst & Young, Capgemini, Accenture, really focused on digital transformation and innovation. And the topic today is really from my collective experience over the past years, where I've essentially was doing early on some B2B collaboration at a company called Rodnet that was essentially, this is in the early days of the internet, early 2000, they were building a supply chain collaboration to help organizations link and be able to work on very complex processes and deals. At Matrix One, which is a company that was acquired by Dassault Systèmes, which is a big French technology software company. It was a product lifecycle management company that was essentially focused on automating early R&D processes, but also how do you collaborate with your part suppliers, your material suppliers, to be able to ensure that you're getting the right parts before you finalize your bill of material. So the whole concept of going from just a drawing, an idea, all the way to like having your first bill of material, your prototype, and all those things. I spent several years implementing those kind of systems. And more recently at Accenture, I was in the digital practice leading the Connected Logistics offering, which was really how you leverage IoT to do multimodal track and trace around air, ocean, rail, and the road. Also looking at logistics demand forecasting, leveraging AI, looking at blockchain around import exports and multi-party supply chain collaboration. And so that's kind of the context why I picked this topic of around intelligent supply chain. So happy to let Chris and Nidhi to introduce themselves.
I'm Chris, based in Phoenix with some also mixed blood. I'm French and American. I was the CTO and CEO for 10 years as CEO, 5 years as CTO in charge of all product operations at a company called Axway. I took Axway from 60 million to 300. Axway compete with MuleSoft, Google, IBM, Oracle, TIBCO. And our strength were B2B, and we did a lot of supply chain. That's from that knowledge and experience fighting the same problem and again that I founded Sky Republic in 2016.
Nidhi?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Didi. Hi, I'm Nidhi. I'm the CEO of Podcast. At Podcast, we predict how cargo moves across the world on ships and if any external disruptions are likely to impact the movement of this cargo. These could be normal operational disruptions that the shipping companies are making, but it could also be completely unforeseen or unplanned for disruptions like port congestion, cyclones, and geopolitical conflicts. And the way we do that is through data. My background personally has been in logistics, and I worked for DHL for a decade in business roles like management consulting, business development, and strategy across Asia before starting podcast about 4 years back. Glad to be here. Thank you, Didi.
Welcome. Didi, you're on mute.
Yeah, so let's jump into the program here. So I'll spend just about 15 minutes talk about what's happening around innovation and disrupting the supply chain. And then I'll hand it over to Chris to talk about what problems that he has identified that really made him build the Sky Republic platform, leveraging blockchain. And then after Chris, same thing for Nidhi to talk about business problems, things that she has really observed throughout her career at DHL around shipping, and then how she's bringing that through AI in help address those challenges. And then we'll have about 20 minutes of Q&A, etc. But throughout the presentation, if there's a quick question that you want us to clarify or anything, like, feel free to stop us. But we also have 20 minutes after this. So let's see, let me share my screen again. All right. Okay. Right, so what is happening at the macro trend here? So we know that like on-demand economy, right? Like all of us, we want to be able to more and more get things by just clicking the button and being able to have it something delivered to us. I mean, it used to be that 3 days delivery was like acceptable, like not even like 5-10 years ago, but now same day is almost now become the standard, and now we're pushing it towards to like 1 hour delivery. So that is obviously driving a lot of constraint with the third-party logistic providers, and especially also the e-commerce platform, the sellers. And so you also have another trend that started also around consumer packaged good companies going direct to consumers, right? Rather than having to sell Walmart or Amazon where the margins are squeezed, right? They're trying to find ways to sell directly to consumers to be able to build that one-to-one relationships. And so that is also adding volume across the supply chain network. You also have new business model around subscription e-commerce, right? For example, wine subscription clubs. You get a couple of wine bottles every month. You even get also things like your razor getting shipped to you on a monthly basis. Other products, similar to things. There's even now in California, like cannabis clubs where they ship you a few joints every month. And so that is also putting a lot of constraint because these are small items. And so these small items are actually more expensive to handle than like when you're shipping a big package, when you're shipping pallets, those kind of things. And so that is a cost driver actually for these 3PL, what we call third-party logistic providers, these e-commerce companies. And certainly nothing new here, labor shortage, space constraint. As e-commerce growing, we need more warehouse space, and urban density is a problem for that. And so what is happening, looking at micro fulfillment centers to get closer and closer to the consumers. So you have Amazon being creative by setting up this micro fulfillment location where they drop ship things and you could go pick it up. Or obviously they're leveraging their Whole Foods network now, but others are leveraging like lockers where you could go and pick up your shipment. So space constraint is an issue. Obviously, COVID has also accelerated e-commerce demand as well. And so these 4 factors, obviously there's a lot more, but if you look at these big major factors, on-demand economy, like faster fulfillment, consumer packaged good going direct to consumers, subscription-based e-commerce and all these things, that is, even though there's increase in volume, that much higher increase in volume is not translating into higher profitability. It's actually compressing the margins of these supply chain companies. So, and as a result, if you need to have to still handle this growing volume and your margins are not really expanding, then you have also labor shortage. That what you end up having to do is really try to think about digital first supply chain, where you're essentially having to have that, creating that seamless customer experience through digital, and then being able to connect with and manage your entire network leveraging digital. And digital, by that mean leveraging AI, leveraging mobile, leveraging other technologies such as robotics. So the greater need of automation. So that is kind of what we're seeing, and that's been accelerating much faster over the past couple of years. And certainly, right, the greater need for automation is also getting facilitated because you have the exponential growth of IoT device. The cost of these sensors is dropping significantly. They were about at least 1/20th the cost about 10 years ago. The cost of an industrial robot, 2010, the average cost of an industrial robot was $46K. We are around mid $25K right now. And then in the next few years, it's going to drop to about $11K or less. Certainly, we know about blockchain because of crypto, but blockchain has a lot of tremendous value to bring into supply chain. And an enterprise blockchain is expected to grow at 55% CAGR over the next 6-7 years or so. And so the fact that the technology total cost of ownership is dropping, that is also another driver to help with the adoption within supply chain. So to help obviously improve the margin that I was talking about earlier. And if you look at it from a public market standpoint, right, robotics and AI publicly traded stock are also holding up pretty well. There's an ETF called BOTZ, BOTZ. The multiple as of December 2nd was 37 roughly. And then the multiple at the end of December 2021 was around 35. And so I've been tracking it throughout the past 12 months. It dropped as low as 30 middle of this year, but now it's up at 37. So it's higher. The multiple of this ETF is actually higher now than it was at the end of 2021. So you also have another secular trend that's happening, going from robot CapEx to robot fixed out of service, the same way we saw software on-premise shifting to software out of service. That secular trend is starting to happen in robotics. And those robotics as a service have a higher multiple than the robot CapEx vendors. And so supply chain, sometimes people talk about supply chain and define it differently, but the academic definition, I would say, there are 5 key function: plan, source, make, deliver, and return. Sometimes in the corporate world, supply chain is decoupled from manufacturing. I think that is more from an org chart standpoint. But if you're manufacturing something, you're supplying something. And so I mean, personally, I include manufacturing in supply chain for those reasons. And what's been happening across these 5 key functions of the supply chain area, right? On a plan side, which is probably one of the hardest areas of supply chain, being able to accurately forecast how many workers you're going to need, how many transportation trucks or pallets or containers you're going to need, right? That is an extremely difficult task. And more AI companies are getting into space, trying to leverage as much historical data, but new source of data to be able to increase forecasting. When you go from the sourcing all the way to the return side, blockchain is starting to now make some headway in there, because as you need to know how to source your critical components and being able to have enough lead time to get those whatever chips that you might need or other critical components, you need to be able to effectively collaborate and be able to share your product design early on with these suppliers so that you can at least understand that if you're going to put certain parts in your design, you want to make sure these parts will be available 6 months down the line when you're ready to manufacture. And so leveraging blockchain to be able to securely exchange information about bill of material, those kind of things. And at the same time, being able to also, on the ethical side, understanding the provenance of certain components, like, obviously trying to avoid conflict minerals or trying to understand the authenticity of some of the raw material that you bring, including in your product. And so leveraging blockchain for those kind of things. And obviously, as you manufacture and then you deliver these products and sell them, right? If they need to be returned or they need to be repaired, right? In certain industries, regulation means that you have to track the history of every single part from beginning to end. And that has been very challenging. And we're going to say that in the example of the airline industry, but also in medical device, highly regulated, where that the tracking of part that you repair and the history is highly critical to be able to stay compliant. And the combination of using blockchain and IoT, where if you're tracking something using a sensor, whether you're tracking temperature, you're tracking location, you want to be able to also have that information from the sensors be able to be securely stored without being tampered. And you can use blockchain for that. But also, if you need to have smart contract that might trigger an insurance event, let's say that the sensor temperature detected that the temperature was too high inside the container and it could lead to some product spoilage, by being able to capture that high above temperature event into the blockchain, and then a smart contract would then trigger an insurance claim. That is also something that play a critical role, and blockchain is starting to play a role into those things. So the combination of blockchain and IoT working together into those smart contracts has started already a few years ago, but it's starting to gain steam. Let's see. And then when it comes to then, how do you automate your factories, warehouse, and DCs and fulfillment centers? Lights out automation is a term I like to use to say that it's all these dark warehouses where it is fully automated, no human. There are some obviously early experimentation with it, some in China, some in Europe, around early entirely automated, using robotics, but also using AI to help optimize the fleet of robots so that they can work in concert. As you know, there are so many different robot vendors doing different tasks. That fragmentation in the market drives a greater need to have an ability to use AI to optimize different robotic vendors. Last mile delivery is an area, obviously, because the on-demand economy and all those things, a lot of investment has been made in last mile delivery, and that's where you've seen probably the most startups getting launched. Some of the biggest companies in this area are focused on last mile. And so that is where, in terms of investment from venture capital, but also in terms of just valuation created here, right? Last mile has really been a very significant part of the supply chain disruption, supply chain innovation happening. So why last mile is the reason is that if you look at the total logistic cost of US companies, the COVID data is not included here, but certainly you can assume that is higher. Right, we were at about 1.5 trillion roughly of how much companies are spending in logistics in the US. And the one area is certainly around last mile. Last mile represent more than half of the cost of logistics costs. And so that is why you've seen significant investments happening toward last mile, because of it's the biggest chunk of the logistics cost that companies are facing. And so when you look at it, there are about 1,200 unicorn roughly globally. There are about roughly 67 that are purely supply chain. And then out of those 67, 6 are decacorn. That means worth more than $10 billion in valuation. And US tend to dominate the number of unicorn. China second, India seven. Like combination of emerging markets, countries, about 17 roughly. And so the decacorns, you can see they're all pretty much last mile focus, like Instacart, J&T Express, GoPuff. In Turkey, you have Getter, Swiggy in India, Lalamove in Hong Kong. And so last mile delivery is still dominating the number of unicorns that you see in the market. And one really like is FedEx. Right. Dominant company in the US, number one or number two is UPS, depending who you talk to, depending on the year, obviously. Right. This is, if you go ahead. Yeah. Correct. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Is it my internet? It could be my internet. Is everybody hearing Didi okay, or is it robotic? Robotic.
Slow down, robotic, a little choppy.
Okay.
On a scale of 1 to 10,
Is it better now?
No. Well, Grant says it's okay, but he's got super internet problem.
Okay.
There you go. Maybe they just do that.
Okay.
Sorry.
How about now?
Much better.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. Yeah. So if you look at the FedEx website and all the services that they provide, you can see all these startups trying to disrupt FedEx. And so roughly, I mean, this was been a couple of years old. There was about 40 plus startups or so. And the area that you would notice has the highest concentration of startups is around fast shipping. So fast shipping here, where I have the red dot to show you that, and you see all the arrows pointing toward fast shipping, right? That is what I mentioned earlier, the on-demand, faster fulfillment speed requirements that customers are wanting. And that's the reason why there's so much attention around shortening shipping time, shortening delivery time, those kind of things. And so something to take away from the message here is that still last mile, that's where investment is happening the most, and that's where the disruption is happening the most for those reasons I mentioned previously. And so according to McKinsey, right, what is the impact of AI on supply chain? It could have a positive, I guess, value creation of $1.3 trillion around supply chain and manufacturing. And Goldman Sachs estimates that AI can drive logistic costs by 5%, increase profit by $25 billion for the logistics companies. So that's kind of the 15 minutes there to talk about what the happening in the market, especially around supply chain and what supply chain, intelligent supply chain means. So happy to turn it over to Chris to go through his presentation.
Thanks, Didi. Good stuff.
Thanks, Didi.
Oh, can I just make a note, Chris? It'd be really interesting to see the names of the companies in that ETF, as well as the names behind the unicorns. If it's possible, you could share that on our app or otherwise, Didi, but we'll come back to that later.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
Hi, Chris.
Okay, great. So I think I'm a good segue between Didi and Nidhi. I'm going to take it a little bit down. We saw that there is still a lot of issues in supply chain about collaboration and getting faster. And the say is usually that data moves slower than goods in supply chain. And that's true. And I'm going to address that. The title is about blockchain. I just want to say that here it's not a crypto talk. It's not about crypto. It's not coin. It's enterprise blockchain. So a very different kind of beast, serving the same kind of, having the same properties, but basically trying to establish transparency and higher automation in supply chain or whatever ecosystem. And as I was saying in the introduction, I'm a middleware guy, a messaging guy. I've been spending 20 years there. Today, messaging middleware, as you know them through MuleSoft, IBM, Oracle, TIBCO, and a lot of companies, is one of the biggest, fastest growing segment in software. I think it's a $20 billion industry, still growing. Some of the higher segments are growing at 20% because everybody wants to get this data, wants to automate and be more efficient. Now, the problem is that this same messaging that is today powering supply chain is also the issue to digitally transform, because it's helping people connect one-to-one when they transact, when they exchange data. But that doesn't help them see what's going on in the supply chain. And that's the main problem. So I'll talk about aircraft supply chain, where airlines try to supply parts and services to maintain their aircraft, but it's applicable in any ecosystem where you have multiple parties like that transacting. So basically today, all supply chains are stuck in the era of one-to-one texting. Like we were personally to organize a birthday party or something like that. Today we open a WhatsApp and all the participants can connect and see the data, see the invitation, see the timing. In supply chain, you cannot do that. You are 10 years back, where would you just able to do one text to another, and then you have to consolidate. And you see only partially what's going on. You see the message you get and the message you receive. So in supply chain, this messaging technology, which is connecting all the enterprises, is fragmenting processes and data. Participants only have a little piece of what's going on. And that creates huge business problems, friction. You don't know exactly what was shipped, what was the price of that container because there was a last minute change you didn't see. You have disruption you cannot prevent because you made aware of problems too late. As you cannot see all the data, you have issues to optimize your inventory, so you higher working capital. And then you have bad automation. People have to rekey in information again and again, especially the small partners in the chain. You don't have a simple access to upstream data. If you talk about sustainability, it's very difficult to get the sustainability data from upstream or downstream. And you have a low adoption of IoT or artificial intelligence because it's difficult to get this data. So, as I was saying, messaging is really anchored in all supply chains because, in fact, it uses all the standardized transactions that you have today. If you want to do a purchase order, if you want to do a repair order, you'll have a standardized format that everybody understands, everybody is able to deal with. And you can transact that, you can exchange that with messaging, but you don't have this end-to-end visibility and automation. So what people are doing, they use control tower, and I think Nidhi is a kind of control towers. I mean, in an industry, some people are going to create apps and grab all these messages and feed people with this information and give them AI information and stuff like that. That works. It's difficult because you don't find a control tower or solution in each industry segment you're in. And usually it's proprietary, it's hard-coded, and you don't have any transparency because this aggregator just keeps the data, sometimes also resell the data. And you don't have the ability to digitize assets with tokenization is a big trend. On the other side, you have blockchain. And the cryptos showed that you can get consensus on data in an ecosystem through distributed ledgers and smart contracts. You can tokenize assets so they move faster. But for enterprises, it's not usable. It's coin operated, it's decentralized. Supply chain are not decentralized. You want to know who is running that supply chain. And they are public and anonymous. So who wants to put his data on a Bitcoin or something? So there was a new generation that started in 2015 about enterprise blockchain that are scalable, they are confidential and stuff like that. They're still decentralized, which create problems. So there is low adoption of current enterprise blockchain because there's too many cooks in the kitchen. And they are not able to handle these messages. Now, on the good side, they are programmable and transparent. Because they don't handle messages, they are disruptive to current ecosystem. They are disruptive to current ERPs that are used to manage business, right? So many CEOs, Boeing, Airbus, and others said, blockchain is great, but it's not ready yet for us. We are waiting for the next generation. And that's what we do at Sky Republic. We basically created an hybrid of a control tower and an enterprise blockchain. So you have a platform that is permissioned, that is programmable, that is transparent, that is verifiable to monitor your business, basically. And you can digitize, you can automate your processes, your asset end-to-end in consensus, meaning you see everything and everybody sees exactly the same data. So you can do these new offerings and you have a platform to really release services that can work. So I'll take an example. So basically our platform, you buy it and you can develop apps on top that to manage your processes and your data and create your own services. So one use case I want to share is what SITA is doing with us. So SITA is the Swift of air transportation. It was created by a couple airlines in 1949, putting their information system together. So they have a platform to transact in the industry. Nowadays, it's $1.7 billion in revenues. It's co-owned by 400 actors in the industry, and they are operating the largest messaging platform in air transportation used by airlines, MROs, OEMs. And what they want to do with us, what they are doing with us, is building apps to accelerate repair orders, inventory exchange, part trading to maintain their aircraft. An aircraft costs up to $5 million to maintain a year. So it's a big problem for them. We've been chosen against good old messaging technology like WebSphere from IBM or Google APG, or even SITA own messaging platform. And we've been also benchmarked against the enterprise blockchain, Hyperledger, Fabric, Recorda, or Ethereum. The project is supposed to help 100 companies by 2025. You see some names here, really streamline their aircraft maintenance and get a competitive advantage, basically being more profitable. And you know, airlines, it's a big deal for them. So 2 use cases real quick to show you what it can do and how people can leverage that in another environment, in other industries. So big thing for an airline is the repair order. 400 repair orders per aircraft a year. If you are American Airlines, you have 800 aircraft, so 800 multiplied by 400. And the thing is that winning 2-3 hours per repair order, that's a total savings of 30 million a year they can have. So what the platform does is that through smart contract, which is basically a multi-party collaboration, pre-coded piece of code, an airline can start throw an order that's going to be captured by an MRO, which is like the logistics of the maintenance world. They orchestrate the maintenance. So they connect to OEMs that are the one manufacturing the parts to repair the aircraft. And then the MRO is going to acknowledge and is going to ship, the part is going to be shipped. The OEM is going to make a quotation about how much is going to take to repair the part. The quote is approved. There is a diagnostic report called the teardown report that is sent. There is an invoice, the party ship it back, and then it's received. So it's kind of very traditional, very similar to a purchase order in retail or a shipment order for logistics. The key is that here you saw that while the events were happening, everybody was getting the information directly in the ERP, and they have end data. Of course, there's confidentiality parameters. You can hide some stuff, but they have all the same data, and they are sure everybody has the same data, which is the key. That's the consensus thing. So airlines save money, MRO OEMs save also money per order because it's all automated, but you also reduce friction and disruption. So here they can see right away there will be a delay on the part. Parts are very expensive. An engine for an aircraft is $10 to $30 million. So if you have a delay, are you going to lease such an expensive thing? Probably yes, it's going to cost you a lot of money. If an aircraft is stuck on the ground, it's $150,000 per hour than the airline is going to miss in revenues. There's huge number there. Another example is tokenization. So you heard about tokens, but here is a very pragmatic example. These aircraft are made of a lot of parts, up to 70,000 serialized parts. And when you buy some parts, and you do that all the time, you have to retrieve all the records of the part to be able to make your due diligence, to make sure the part is worth it, and also for the compliance. So through a token, when a part changes hands, the token is going to index all the records, the documents that are going to be used. And each time there is a change of ownership, the token is going to check which record have been already verified. So at the end, if I'm airline 12 and suddenly I buy an engine, I can reduce the time it's going to take me to do the due diligence, and I can also do my compliance much faster. So for a lessor, and there is more and more low-cost airlines that lease a lot of aircraft and engines, you can gain up to 10% in revenue using tokens, because the due diligences between different owners can be reduced from 6 to 1 month. So it's a lot of money that go directly to their EBITDA. For an airline, you have to report if a single part on an aircraft was already involved in an incident, you have to report that to FAA. How do you do that? It's an engine is 1 to 3 pallets of papers. An aircraft is potentially 10, 15 pallets. With a token, you can see right away the history of a part, and you can accelerate that declaration. So you're going to reduce time in the due diligence, accelerate compliance, and you're going to also get less lease penalties that are usually $1 million or $2 million a month, because you can return your engines and your aircraft much faster by showing that you maintain them properly. So basically, that's what we do. That was an example for aircraft maintenance, but in air transportations, there are many other use cases we're working on with our partner SITA about baggage tracking, about airport operations, how to accelerate change of connections, about border management. And we have now 2 partnerships with 2 companies, Soprastar and Infosys, to go further. And we think there is a $2 billion addressable market across industries. So it goes through connecting IoT data. In automotive, being able to connect better your supplier and change supplier very quickly. I think Makit said just the supplier integration, being able to connect them more easily and switch more easily. I think that's one of the themes of 361, the reshoring. It's a potential of 20 billion just in automotive of value creation, multimodal services. And I don't talk even about sustainability, right? Getting the data for 10,000, 20,000 suppliers, if you're a big retailer, is a nightmare. How do you get that? So that's examples of how the technology can be used. And that's an example about all of these are just showing that for supply chains to digitally transform, you'll have to re-platform the core, and blockchain, such as Sakara Republic, is the solution to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Nidhi?
Yep, happy to share my screen. All right.
By the way, Nidhi is in Singapore, and you could check your clocks.
So glad to meet everyone virtually. Like I said, I lead Podcast. We predict how cargo moves across the world on ships, and if any external disruptions are impacting the movement of this cargo. The key stakeholder that we are really working with are manufacturers. And if you think about the last couple of years, supply chains and disruptions have really come to the fore. We've had COVID-19, we've had Suez Canal blockage, but then there are also other disruptions that have impacted supply chains, port congestion due to the demand and supply changes, geopolitics and conflicts, from Brexit to the current conflict in Ukraine and Russia, to typhoons. And what this means is that these disruptions are just going to be unending. It's not just a COVID phenomenon. And it's not just COVID which started this. It has been going on for a while. It's just that it did not come to the fore as much as a sort of news topic as it has now. At the same time, if you think about customer expectations, they are just getting tougher. E-commerce delivery timelines are moving from same day to even 2-hour delivery timelines, and that has ripple effects in the entire supply chain upstream. The demand patterns have been increasingly volatile, from sudden fads about what kind of cargo is required to be moving across countries to economic patterns on how demand is changing. All of that impacts shipping in general. And with this context, if you think about goods moving from one country to another continent by ships, there are multiple blind spots because there are so many handovers and change points in the entire supply chain and the journey of cargo. Goods can get stuck in transit. Shipping companies can put the cargo on a completely different ship than was promised because the container doesn't really complain like a passenger when you're kind of offloaded to another flight. And these are all blind spots that the manufacturer has to deal with. And how do they deal with it? Using Excel sheets. This is an actual Excel sheet from a large F&B manufacturer we work with who have 200,000 shipments across the world every year. This is the file that they create every single day, multiple logistics users to figure out what is the arrival time for their cargo going to look like. And it is not even at a granular level. It is just at a bill of lading level or a shipment level. And it's fairly manual. It's really painful. It is, it's just not fair to them. And think about it for the entire container movement across the world, which is about 25 million containers almost every month. So what we intend to solve in Podcast is essentially enabling or empowering these supply chain users to do their job better. How do we do that? Through data. If the basic visibility or the data that companies really care about, these users really care about, is really spread out. It exists in shipping companies' data sets. It is also with terminals and ports. And then there are so many external factors. For example, how's the ship moving? Is it actually arriving at the port? What's the weather pattern? Is there any economic disruption? The good news is that there is a ton of data now available. There is almost 10 times more data than was ever available. And the challenge is, how do we aggregate this data and make it speak the same language and update it real time? And that's what we do. We do this at scale across 98% of shipping containers globally. It's cleaned, normalized, updated on a real-time basis. And any holes in this data are augmented via data that we get from other sources. Let's say the carrier data holes are augmented from the terminals or the satellite data and so on. And then this data is made predictive. So there's second order data sets that are created to make this dynamic and definitely not static. And that includes predictive delay. Is there likely to be a risk because there's a cyclone in the route that a ship was obviously taking between two ports? And make that delay explainable, that there's a 2-day delay expected because of this cyclone. There are other aggregated insights. It could be congestion, which we've seen in the last couple of years becoming such a top of mind phenomena, but also sustainability at a ship level, at a container level, at even an order level. These are all second order data sets that can be created on top of the data sets that we have already aggregated. But more importantly, all of this data, the raw data, which is normalized, and the second order data needs to then fit into the workflow of our customers. It needs to start creating insights that can enable positive action. These actions could be about transport planning, being ready at the warehouse level, clearing customs, making sure the production teams have the right information on the inventory that's arriving, enabling sales teams so that they can promise a better sales arrival time, a sales order delivery time to their customers, but also procurement decisions on what really happened, what cargo, what carriers really performed better than others, what should we do going forward. So that's really what we do, and a little bit glimpse into how the product works. So it's essentially a single source of information across the global supply chain related to shipping. And it's about getting that trustworthy data visualized with sources, with exceptions and alerts set up for anywhere in the world for any large manufacturer or even SMEs. It's then made predictive to say, is there likely to be a delay? Why is it going to be delayed? Where is the delay happening, at the transshipment, at the origin, in any of the interim ports? And making it intuitive so that customers can actually take some action about it, or explain that to their teams and customers. And then finally, creating analytics on it, not just historical analytics, but also predictive insights that can enable multiple use cases, like I mentioned, including market benchmarking and procurement related insights. So what's the value to the customer? These are key statistics that we have worked on jointly with our customers in terms of how visibility and dynamic information helps them. The first is how can they better promise a delivery time to their customers? So when there's a large F&B company or an automotive company, they want to be able to not lose face in front of their customers, that there's a certain delivery timeline that they mentioned and it is being met. And that's where predictive visibility really comes in. The second is in terms of operational planning. When we work with especially automotive companies who are waiting for parts for their assembly line, even if one container goes missing, that container may have carried one part of the motorcycle that they were assembling. And if that is missing, the entire assembly line can come to a halt. And that is really a high impact. So that's the second core use case or impact of the technology. The third is very obvious in terms of the productivity. I think the way the world is evolving, we are using apps and sort of real-time information in every single thing that we're doing in our daily lives. So why at work should we still rely on static data and spreadsheets and ERP systems, which are not really enabling us to actually use our skill set and do something more value adding? So I think that productivity is like the minimum basic value add. And then there are other benefits which are not even something that we quantify, but in terms of the production being just in time, not having buffer inventory in the last couple of years, supply chains have started looking at more just in case, just because the delivery timelines have been insufficient, and managing planning better. We have been doing this for the last 4 years, and we work with some of the largest manufacturing and logistics companies globally. We also work with tech providers. So, sort of typical transport management systems like SAP and Siemens AGX, but also new age transport platforms and workflow solutions. What we have been able to achieve in the last year, and this is something we're really excited about, is that we have hit that product market fit. It's a pure SaaS business model. What we do is not customize, it's the same solution provided to multiple customers, and it fits to their needs. It integrates into their workflow and their platforms very seamlessly in a plug and play manner. A lot of our customers have been inbound, which is even more exciting. It's really about organic growth, and we've been expanding with not just new, but existing accounts quite well this year as well. So the team is about 30 people. We're spread out quite globally now across Europe and Asia. It's a team that brings in, the leadership team brings in deep domain expertise related to logistics and supply chains and operations. And also we have senior tech leaders who come from companies which have built AI and ML products and built infrastructure at scale. It's a VC-backed company. We've been through 2 rounds of fundraising, with the last being in August last year. And we're currently in the process of ramping up for our next fundraise, which is a Series A in Q1. I think the key things from today's discussion, the asks, I guess, would be one, of course, we're kind of getting ready for the fundraise. So if that would be an interesting conversation, would be happy to engage. Secondly, and more importantly, we're in a growth phase. So we're really looking to build more traction, get the product in the hands of more customers. This is not the exhaustive list of companies we work with, and it's a really exciting time in terms of visibility and supply chain digitization, and we want to be able to make a global mark in that. So if you are working with any companies which are similar, or you find any synergies with businesses that you work with, I'd be most happy to engage. And finally, I think, supply chains and how the data that we are capturing, I think that is really interesting, not just for the companies we work with, but let's say even finance, compliance use cases, insurance use cases, or sustainability, carbon footprint of any single container, etc. So if there would be newer use cases of how the data could be interesting, I'd be happy to engage on that as well.
Okay, right. Thank you, Nidhi. Yeah, so let's open up for questions. Anyone who, so it's open audience.
Yeah, questions, everyone?
Any questions?
I have some, but I'll defer to others first. The one, it's partly a question, partly my ask, is to have you go deeper into the shipping side, Nidhi. I'd love to have you. It's such an interesting part of the market. You really do see a lot of data. Both. And are you we've talked about like a lot of water market transportation, but are you looking at, how granular do you get inland?
Yeah, we've been kind of trying to focus on one mode of transport and get really, really good at that, and sort of get data, that is not just from one source, but multiple sources just for that. Within the data set we do capture rail and road movements whenever the carrier is accountable for those. We will be launching another mode of transport in the first quarter next year. But yeah, inland is kind of a harder piece because every country is very different in terms of, how sensors and trackers are integrated or trucks information is integrated. So that's probably going to be not for the first half of next year.
Bill, do you have a question?
Yes. Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. Perhaps going from the very sexy to the very sublime. What do you see a lot of these advances with regard to the impact on kind of the current system that we have, and particularly here in the US, where industrial distribution centers have been absolutely the hot ticket in real estate, for quite some time. Do you see anything plus or minus having, in terms of what you're seeing out there on the front edge of things that might impact the current system that we have here? And I'll apologize if that's a little bit out of your ballparks.
Yeah, I mean, so your question is about what would affect the current distribution center networks that we have here in the US?
Yeah, good translation. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think certainly, obviously real estate cost, because I mean, in the urban areas, you can't put these mega distribution centers, so you have to try to be creative. And I mentioned earlier what Amazon leveraging Whole Foods, right, for distribution. I mean, not everyone can obviously have a Whole Foods. So I mean, whoever has that retail, e-commerce, brick and mortar combination is able to do that. But even Walmart doesn't really have a presence in New York. So it's about looking at how you could set up micro fulfillment centers, maybe a couple 100 square feet, that could essentially allow you to stock up enough inventory for quick delivery. And I think also, if you could leverage the US Postal Service branches, which in some way the US Postal Service is being used for like delivery, but they don't really store inventory. And so, and there's quite a bit of idle capacity in the US Postal Service because they're usually busy in the morning, like 3 to 4 in the morning to maybe mid-morning to do the sortation and everything, and then they're out to deliver it, but the afternoon is pretty much idle. So what if you're able to use that space to store inventory of like small items that you can quickly deliver? So I think that could be a new business model for the US Postal Service in a way. So we'll see if that would come to fruition and who's able to pull it off is them. And obviously the reshoring of manufacturing also could also obviously affect the distribution centers here as well. So that's my take.
Needed you or anyone, Chris, you want to add? I know Andrew's got a question.
Yeah. Having worked in warehousing and distribution centers business as well in DHL, I think I remember one of the customers. It's a large Asian airline, and we visited their distribution center. And their technology was basically the people that they had. And you could ask the people where this particular part of this airline is placed, and they know exactly which shelf it is in, and they would walk you over, and that's the technology that they have. And on the other side, we were seeing companies like Amazon really becoming logistics companies, right? No longer e-commerce, but having robots, in their entire warehouse, completely automated, more efficient. And that's really what traditional logistics companies need to do. And DCs and RDCs need to be really digitized. The second thing is, I recently had a conversation with one of the large supply chain companies on regional DCs, and the concept of regional DCs would no longer just be about warehousing and transportation domestically or in the region itself, but also taking care of the inbound and outbound and integrating the LLP, the lead logistics provider, or the 4PL kind of concept within the regional distribution center. I think the goal of the regional distribution center needs to be uplifted from really about inventory management to holistic supply chain. And then, like Didi said, reshoring for sure will have an impact on where the RDCs are and whether it needs to be more and more decentralized.
So I know we're at the bottom of the hours. Do we want to?
Well, just real quick, Andrew, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks for a great presentation. I'm curious about with the introduction of the electronic vehicle trucking market by the likes of Elon Musk, and how does this affect the economics of this whole ecosystem? Are they going to be widely used starting now, or are they going to be slowly rolled and meshed into the equation?
I mean, I think it's going to be slow because the not having sufficient EV charging stations, which is a big part of this Inflation Reduction Act, but that's several years away to really make this an EV charging nationwide. So it's going to take some time. I mean, certainly for the FedEx, UPSs of the world, or US Postal Service is lowering their cost per mile driven, which is fine, but I don't think that's not really the biggest cost component for them. So yeah, it could impact, but I don't think it's gonna be materially impacting the bottom line. I mean, it's great for the environment and all those things, but I think there are other factors that are more driving costs for them, like how to handle small items like razors or wine bottles, and how you make sure that they're shipped, they don't break. That smaller number of items increasing, that's driving a lot of the cost for these companies.
My understanding on a cursory level is that the maintenance on these trucks is dramatically reduced. Thereby, I would think saving a ton of money. But thank you for your answer.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a question in the chat, I think, for you, Chris, about Maersk and IBM.
Yeah, that's made the news last week. I think Maersk and IBM had that project TradeLens about sharing documents for the container industry. There was a lot of people joining. They announced that they were stopping, and I've just cited information because I was talking with some that were involved in the consortium. basically, I mean, there is two things there. First, it's very complex processes, and usually the problem of digital transformation is reworking these processes. And in a way, the solution was a big SaaS platform, not really a blockchain, and probably they could not deliver all the value they wanted because of that. That's my view. Maybe Sky Republic centric, but it's not at all the end of the thing. I think it's just showing that it's a big thing. You really have to be laser focused about what you want as business value, and don't overestimate the implementation at the project side. And you use a blockchain, you use a messaging technology, whatever, it's going to be big project and difficult projects. So I think there will be a new trade lens. That's what I think, or maybe a couple others, because also a lot of industry players joined, and at the same time they were pissed off that it was owned by Maersk because they have the impression. So in air transportation, in my example, SITA is very neutral because they are co-owned, so they are not a market player. I think a lot of this platform will benefit from this kind of neutral entities to help solve this digital problem. Yeah, that's a couple insight. But it has to move on. There is the need, right? Everybody wants it faster, wants to be visibility. So this digital problem has to be cracked. And maybe to link with a previous question, there is this, maybe you heard about the physical internet concept, which is about applying an infrastructure very similar to how the internet moves data to supply chain. There are very interesting projects in Germany through Mercedes Daimler. In Switzerland, they are trying to do another also way to transport containers from north to south. That's the way it's going. There's a lot of infrastructure work on the software side and even on the real hardware with these pods where a truck would not go anymore from Phoenix to New York in one shot. It would go to Tucson. In Tucson, another truck would take it. Maybe there would be 7 little shipments instead of 1. The guy would sleep at home at night. So people would find drivers that want that's the future. And Amazon is working on that. That's where they are really becoming a logistic company. And it's very dangerous because one day they may provide their infrastructure as a service. But not everybody can have one unified infrastructure like that. So in that case, when you have to collaborate with others, then you come to blockchain in a way.
The issue, as I understand it, right, which emerged during the pandemic, and particularly when, let's say, we had all these ships that were, blocked off of the port of Long Beach for, whatever, weeks or months or whatever, was the aspect of chain of custody, right? So I was at Infosys. I've written software for 35 years in supply chain, and done all of that. So I get it. The question that came up, right? So blockchain, you're right that for the most part, SaaS platforms, traditional SaaS platforms are great for any case where you have a centralized counterparty, right, who's managing all these transactions and can see the end-to-end and manage all the contracts and so on. In a case like, say, chain of custody, let's say you have a manufacturer, so the issue here that all of you guys have talked about is you have millions of SKUs which are appearing from all over the place, right? China, everywhere else. They go through many handoffs, right? From freight forwarders to big ships, and then they get broken down on the other side, and so on and so forth. So part of the issue that emerged during the pandemic was that there was no single chain of custody, right? There is no single one platform. There are dozens or thousands of platforms, right? Spreadsheets and everything else. So blockchain lent itself, theoretically, very well to this issue, which is that when you have no one central counterparty and you have all of these, handoffs with customs and with, FOB and all of these, kind of issues. Now, when Maersk and IBM, you'd think that these guys are pretty good at, these two things at figuring this thing out. If TradeLens didn't succeed, clearly the issue would have been that, okay, the whole contractual and ownership and those kind of questions would have been the hard part to sort out, not the tech side, right? The tech side of blockchain, everything else is easy, right? To do, you can program anything. How do you see that problem being solved, which is the aspect of, okay, getting agreement, first of all, across all of these different customs rules and so many currencies and like so many different things, right, to avoid what happened. So during the next pandemic, we don't have another situation where nobody knows when stuff is going to show up.
Yeah, I'm working in the air transportation industry, and there is an interesting platform called ULD Care, where there's 80 airline that is handling container demurrage, and they want to open it to freight and logistics, and there is this formalization of a change of custody, which is usually a message. And that's a typical example of what I'm saying, that usually blockchain are difficult to handle because the chain of custody acknowledgement come through messaging. So you have to be able to swallow these things. Now, ULD Care is a industry platform, and I think in the sea freight area there is no such thing. It means that at one point you may have still multiple platforms existing, but you may want to move your data to one to contract under that platform kind of custody, right? And that dynamic thing is where the problem is, because effectively the decentralized aspect of blockchain, who is going to put all their data on Ethereum or Bitcoin, is never going to happen. You have to have confidentiality on this data. You can get business intelligence out of it. So it has to be one operator. And now you may have multiple platforms, but now, in the early 2000s, I was working on standardizing processes for logistics and automotive and paper industry. Never happened because the technology was not there. But underlying all of that, that's what it is. If we had standard processes that everybody can interoperate with, then all these questions are solved. And I think that's what blockchain is opening, is a door to get there, to have finally a technology where you can have processes that are technology platform independent, that you can run on with any operator to solve these issues. But it's much more easy when you have an industry platform, when it's spread, when you have no obvious thing like a SWIFT, like in banking. Everybody has a banking platform as a bank, but if you had to try to move some money with another bank, you can use SWIFT, and that has value. So I think in the ocean it will come. I think like it's coming in air transportation. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions?
Maybe one last general question, Didi. Maybe this is part of your wrap up. Is this what I'd be curious what other topics in this field interest our community to focus on? If there are one or two or three others. And maybe you've already got that in mind, Didi.
Like in terms of other topics, I mean.
So last time we talked about ethics came up with robotics.
Yeah.
But not that we can revisit the entire ecosystem of questions, but just curious what people think. Or if you just maybe a general comment. Anybody that's still here, you can let me or Didi know, and we'll be curious to keep these conversations going on these themes. So maybe with that, Didi, back to you for wrap up.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions. So I'm the general partner, Human Plus Machine Rise Ventures. We look into early stage robotics, IoT, AI, enterprise blockchain. And so the philosophy behind the fund is really to look at how human and machine with the physical software can coexist without destroying communities, people getting harmed, losing their jobs, or facing biases from AI. So we want any business to use machine to complement its workforce, or any consumer to use machine to improve their lives. So that's the philosophy behind the fund and how we look at opportunities in the market. And why now? It's really about that, as we've been going through a very painful public market correction and the economic uncertainty, but history has shown that fortunes are made during down markets and collected during up market. So, right, as you look to see the next 10 years, the next big companies are getting forged right now, the same way after the dot-com crash, Google came out of it. After the 08, 09, it was Uber and Airbnb, right? Same around this period, strongly believe that the next big tech giants are getting forged, getting spin out right now. So, and obviously the secular trend that I mentioned, right? Software on-premise dominated the 70s, 80s, then part of the 90s, and we shift significantly to software as a service, which is now the business model. The same way we starting to see secular trend from robot CapEx to robotic as a service, which obviously providing higher multiples. The conversion happening across these four technology, which I mentioned in the past, right? I think present new opportunities to exploit, and the resiliency of this public robotics and AI stock in this market corrections, the multiples that are sustaining compared to 2021 levels, compared to other ETFs, the S&P 500, which is a multiple of PE of 21. So these are all good signals for these particular sectors that I've been talking about. And so even though the multiple have kept at that level, despite the market corrections, they're still early stage deal reasonably valued in the sector $12 million valuation range. And so I think if you have any questions, you want to learn some more, happy to connect with you, and my contact information is here. Feel free to reach out, and if you want to have additional conversation with Nidhi and Chris, yeah, happy to also facilitate as well. So thank you for your time. Thanks for joining. Talk to you soon.